I've been hiking for 20 years. I've done the PCT, parts of the Appalachian, and more weekend solo trips than I can count. I know the difference between a twig snapping because of the wind and a twig snapping because something stepped on it. I know that the woods aren't usually scary, they're just indifferent. They don't care if you live or die. But what happened to me last October in the Cascades wasn't indifference. It felt personal. It was supposed to be a simple out and back. Just a solitary overnight trip to clear my head after a brutal month at work. I parked my sedan at the trailhead around 10:00 a.m. The air was crisp, that specific kind of sharp cold you only get in late autumn, smelling of decaying pine needles and damp earth. I checked my gear, tent, sleeping bag, bare canister, water filtration, and locked the car. The first few hours were perfect. The sun was filtering through the canopy, dappling the ground in gold and shadow. I didn't see a single soul. That's usually what I look for. I hate crowded trails where you have to say hello every 5 minutes. I wanted silence. By late afternoon, I reached the spot I'd picked out on the map. It was a small clearing near a ridge line, overlooking a valley of dense, dark evergreens. I set up camp efficiently. Muscle memory took over. Tent up. Pad inflated. Bag rolled out. I boiled some water for a freeze-dried meal and sat on a log, watching the light drain out of the sky. That's when the atmosphere shifted. It wasn't sudden. It was a slow, creeping heaviness. You know how usually at dusk the insects get louder? Crickets, cicadas, the rustle of small nocturnal animals waking up. This was the opposite. The forest didn't just get quiet, it went mute. The wind died. The birds stopped. It was like someone had thrown a heavy wool blanket over the world. I sat there holding my metal cup of tea, feeling the hair on my arms stand up. My brain started doing that logical shuffle, trying to rationalize the fear. It's just the temperature drop. It's just predator pressure, maybe a cougar passed by. Then I heard it. It came from down in the valley, maybe 300 yards into the thick timber. Whisper. It wasn't a tune. It was a single, sharp, rising note, like someone calling a dog. I froze. My first thought was, oh, another hiker. But who calls for a dog 300 yards off trail in near darkness? And why hadn't I seen any headlamps or heard any walking? I waited. A minute passed. Then, from a completely different direction, behind me uphill, the answer came. Whisper. Exact same pitch, exact same length. My stomach dropped. This wasn't a bird, I know bird calls. This was human lips blowing air, and they were coordinating. I slowly set my cup down. I didn't want to make a sound. I reasoned that maybe it was hunters, poachers maybe, but they were too close to my camp. I stood up, clicking my headlamp on. The beam cut a bright white cone into the darkness, illuminating floating dust motes and the rough bark of the pines. Hello, I called out. My voice sounded thin and weak, swallowed instantly by the trees. I'm camped here, just letting you know. Silence. Then from the left, closer this time, whist. It was mocking me. I knew it instantly. It wasn't a signal to another person anymore. It was a signal to me. I backed toward my tent, my hand drifting to the knife on my belt. It was a pathetic 4-inch blade, good for cutting salami, useless for self-defense, but it was all I had. I unzipped the tent fly and scrambled inside, zipping it shut. I know, nylon doesn't protect you from anything, but it's a psychological barrier. It feels like a wall. I lay there in the dark, clutching the knife, straining my ears. For an hour, nothing happened. The adrenaline started to fade, leaving me shaky and exhausted. I told myself I was being paranoid. Maybe it really was just a bird, some owl species I didn't know. I tried to force myself to sleep. I must have dozed off, because I woke up to the sound of crunching. It was the distinctive sound of dry leaves being crushed under heavy boots. Crunch. Pause, crunch, pause, slow, deliberate, not an animal. Animals scuttle or trot. This was a bipedal heavy stride. And it was right outside the tent. I stopped breathing. I literally held my breath, my heart hammering against my ribs so hard I thought they would hear it. The footsteps stopped. I stared at the dark fabric of the tent wall. The moon must have risen because there was a faint, milky glow coming through the rainfly. And then a shadow blocked it. A silhouette pressed against the side of the tent. It was the shape of a head. Someone was standing inches from my face, separated only by 2 thin layers of nylon. They didn't say anything. They didn't try to open the zipper. They just stood there. I could hear their breathing. It was wet, ragged breathing, a slight wheeze on the inhale. I gripped the knife so hard my knuckles ached. I wanted to scream, to yell, "Go away," but my throat was paralyzed. I felt like prey. I felt like a rabbit in a snare. Then a finger slowly traced the fabric. I watched the indentation slide down the wall of the tent, right where my head was. It scratched against the nylon. Zip. Then the whistling started again, but it wasn't loud this time. It was a whisper whistle right against the fabric, low and breathless. Whist. Then a giggle, a low, guttural, masculine giggle. "I see you," a voice whispered. It wasn't a shout, it was quiet, conversational. "You're trembling." I lost it. The terror broke the dam. "Get the hell away from me," I screamed, my voice cracking. "I have a gun. I swear to God I'll shoot." The shadow didn't flinch. The voice just laughed again. "No, you don't." Then the footsteps started again. Crunch, crunch, but they were walking away. I didn't move for the rest of the night. I sat upright, knife in hand, staring at the door. Every time the wind blew, every time a pinecone fell, I almost had a heart attack. I waited for the sunrise like a dying man waits for a priest. When the gray light of dawn finally seeped into the tent, I didn't wait. I didn't pack. I didn't make breakfast. I grabbed my keys, my wallet, and my phone. I left the tent, the sleeping bag, the stove, everything. I unzipped the door and sprinted. I ran down that trail faster than I have ever run in my life. I tripped over roots, scraped my knees, and kept running. I didn't look back. I didn't stop until I saw the glimmer of my car's windshield in the parking lot. I fumbled with the keys, dropped them, scrambled to pick them up, and practically dove into the driver's seat. I locked the doors and started the engine, peeling out of the gravel lot. I drove for 20 miles before I finally pulled over at a gas station to vomit. The adrenaline crash hit me all at once. I was shaking so bad I couldn't hold a water bottle. I reported it to the Rangers. I told them everything. They took a report, said they'd investigate, but they gave me that look. The look that says, "City boy got scared of the dark." They said they found my campsite. They said my gear was there, but it had been rummaged through. But they didn't tell me the worst part. I found that out later. When I got home, I was unpacking the few things I had in my pockets. I pulled out my phone. I hadn't had service up there, so I hadn't looked at it. But when I unlocked the screen, my gallery was open. There was a video. It was timestamped 3:00 a.m. I pressed play, my hands shaking. The video was dark, just the black screen of the phone lens covered or in darkness. But the audio was crystal clear. It was the sound of me sleeping, the soft, rhythmic sound of my own breathing. And then, over the top of my breathing, a voice whispered, close to the microphone. "He looks so peaceful." Then the camera moved. It wasn't pitch black anymore. A light flicked on, my own headlamp, which I had left in the tent mesh pocket. The camera panned down. It showed me, sleeping in my sleeping bag. The person had been inside the tent. They had unzipped it while I was asleep, before I woke up to the footsteps. They had been inside, watching me, filming me with my own phone, and then they had zipped it back up and stepped outside to start the whistling game. They could have killed me. They could have done anything. But they just wanted me to know that I was never safe. I don't hike anymore. I don't go into the woods. I sold all my gear. Because every time I close my eyes, I hear that wet, wheezing breath, and I wonder how long he stood there, hovering over me in the dark, deciding whether to let me wake up. People ask me why I don't hike in the Appalachians anymore. They ask why I moved out west to the desert, where the sightlines go on for miles and there are no deep, dark hollers to hide things. I usually tell them it's because of the humidity or the bugs, but that's a lie. It's because of what happened to me 3 years ago in the Monongahela National Forest in West Virginia. If you've never been there, the Monongahela is ancient. It feels old in a way that the Rockies don't. The mountains aren't jagged peaks. They're soft, rolling, green mounds that look like sleeping giants covered in moss. But down in the valleys, the vegetation is so thick it feels like a jungle. Rhododendrons grow 10 feet high, creating these twisted tunnels that block out the sun. You can be 5 feet off the trail and be completely invisible. I was doing a section hike near the Cranberry Wilderness. It's a remote area known for being rugged and wet. I was an experienced hiker, carrying a 40-pound pack, planning for 3 days of solitude. I wanted to test out some new gear and disconnect from the grid. On the second day, around noon, the weather turned. The sky went a bruised purple color, and the air pressure dropped so fast my ears popped. A storm was coming. I needed to find a lower elevation to set up camp before the lightning started. I checked my map and saw a topography line that flattened out near a creek bed about 2 miles down a side trail. It wasn't a marked trail, more of a social trail, a path worn down by deer and adventurous hikers. I took the turn. The path was overgrown immediately. The rhododendrons were pressing in on both sides, their waxy leaves brushing against my arms and face. It was claustrophobic. The light was dimming rapidly, not just from the storm, but from the sheer density of the canopy. It felt like walking into a throat. About 20 minutes in, I heard it. "Help me." It was faint, a woman's voice. It didn't sound panicked exactly. It sounded tired, resigned. I stopped dead. "Hello," I shouted. "Is someone there?" Silence, just the wind picking up in the trees above, making the branches groan. Then again, "Help me, please." It was coming from down the slope, to my right, down into the thickest part of the brush toward the creek. My rescue mode kicked in. I'm not an EMT, but I've taken wilderness first aid courses. I assumed someone had slipped on the mossy rocks and broken an ankle. It happens all the time out there. "I hear you," I yelled, dropping my pack to mark the trail. "Keep talking, I'm coming down." I started picking my way down the slope. It was steep and slick with mud. I had to grab onto roots and saplings to keep from sliding. "Where are you hurt?" I called out. "My leg," the voice drifted back. "I can't move." The voice was weirdly consistent. Same volume, same flat tone. At the time, I chalked it up to shock. Shock makes people act strange, makes them detached from their pain. I pushed through a wall of ferns and saw the creek. It was a dark, tannin-stained ribbon of water cutting through the gray rocks. "I'm at the creek," I shouted. "Where are you?" "I'm here," the voice said. It sounded like it was right behind me. I spun around, nothing but trees. "Where?" I asked, a little frustration creeping in. The storm was about to break. I could hear the thunder rumbling like stones in a dryer. "Down here by the big rock." I looked downstream. About 50 yards away, there was a massive boulder, the size of a van, covered in lichen. And sure enough, protruding from behind it, I saw a hiking boot. Relief washed over me. I jogged over the slippery river stones, carefully balancing. "Okay, I see you, I'm coming." As I got closer, I saw the leg. It was wearing a sturdy brown hiking boot and gray wool socks. The leg was twisted at an odd angle, definitely broken. The person was lying mostly behind the rock, obscured by the angle. "I'm going to help you," I said, slowing down as I approached. "My name is Mark. What's yours?" Silence. I rounded the corner of the boulder. "Hey, I need you to tell me your..." I stopped. My brain simply refused to process what I was seeing. There was a leg, just a leg. It wasn't severed, it wasn't bloody, it was fading. The hiking boot and the shin were solid, realistic. But at the knee, the flesh just sort of dissolved into a mass of tangled roots and dirt. It looked like a sculpture made of mud and sticks that had been perfectly painted to look like a human leg. And there was no body attached to it, just a pile of wet leaves and forest debris. I stared at it, my mind reeling. Is this a prank, a mannequin? Then from the rhododendrons directly above me on the bank, maybe 10 feet up, the voice spoke again. "My leg, I can't move." It wasn't a woman's voice anymore. It was my voice. It was a perfect recording of what I had shouted 5 minutes ago, but it was distorted, like it was being played through a speaker underwater. The hair on the back of my neck stood up so straight it hurt. This wasn't a rescue. This was a lure. I looked up into the dense green wall of leaves above me. I couldn't see anything, but I could hear movement. Something heavy was shifting its weight, not the scurrying of a squirrel or a deer. This was something heavy and soft, sliding against the dirt. I backed away slowly, my eyes locked on the brush. "Who's there?" I whispered. The voice replied instantly, "Who's there?" It mimicked my whisper perfectly. The inflection, the tremor of fear, it nailed it. I turned and ran. I didn't care about slipping. I didn't care about the ankle-breaking rocks. I scrambled up the creek bed, away from the trap. Behind me, the brush exploded. I didn't look back. I heard branches snapping. I heard a wet, slapping sound like wet meat hitting stone. Thwack, 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 it was fast. I hit the slope and clawed my way up on all fours. Mud packed under my fingernails. I was hyperventilating, gasping for air. "I'm coming down," the voice roared from behind me. It was my voice again, shouting the words I had used earlier, but the tone was all wrong. It was angry, guttural. It sounded like a predator growling through a human voice box. I reached the top of the ridge where I'd left my pack. I didn't even stop to put it on properly. I just grabbed the strap and dragged it, sprinting back toward the main trail. The storm finally broke. Rain came down in sheets, instantly soaking me, turning the trail into a river. Thunder cracked directly overhead, shaking the ground. I ran for what felt like an hour, but was probably only 20 minutes. I didn't hear the pursuit anymore over the sound of the rain, but I didn't trust it. I kept visualizing that leg, that perfect fake leg sticking out from the rock. It was a biological prop. Something had made it to attract curious humans. I finally burst onto the main, marked trail. I practically collided with a group of 3 hikers coming the other way, huddled in rain ponchos. They screamed when they saw me. I must have looked like a maniac, covered in mud, eyes wide, dragging my pack, gasping like a dying fish. "Are you okay?" one of them asked, a guy in his 20s. I grabbed his arm. "We have to go, we have to leave now." "Whoa man, calm down. What happened? Is there a bear?" "Not a bear," I choked out. "Just, we need to go." I walked with them back to the trailhead. I didn't let them stop. I stayed in the middle of their group, constantly looking over my shoulder into the dark, dripping woods. When we got to the parking lot, I threw my gear in my truck and locked the doors. I didn't wait for them to ask more questions. I just drove. I never reported it. What was I going to say? "Officer," a pile of mud mimicked my voice and chased me. They'd lock me up for a psych eval. But I did some research later, deep in the archives of missing persons forums. There are stories, old Appalachian folklore about things that live in the deep hollers, things that learn, things that sound like crying babies or hurt women or lost children. They say if you hear your name called in the woods, don't look back. But nobody tells you what to do when you hear your own voice calling you into the dark. I still have nightmares about that leg. The detail of the laces on the boot, the texture of the wool sock. It was so perfect. It had obviously seen a hiker before. It had studied us. It knew exactly what we look like and exactly what makes us stop and help. It knew that our empathy is our weakness. The desert plays tricks on you. That's the first thing you learn when you spend enough time in southern Utah. The heat waves shimmer off the red rock, turning distant mesas into floating islands. The silence is so absolute that your ears start to invent sounds just to give your brain something to process. I've been a landscape photographer for 10 years, specializing in the American Southwest. I'm used to the isolation. I crave it. Or I used to. Last May, I headed out to a remote section of the Grand Staircase Escalante National Monument. I'm not going to name the specific canyon. Not because I'm trying to gatekeep the spot, but because I don't want anyone else to go there. Ever. I was chasing the perfect slot canyon shot, those winding, narrow corridors of sandstone where the light bounces off the walls and turns everything a deep, glowing orange. I had a permit for a solo overnight trip. My plan was to hike about 7 miles in, set up a minimal camp on a sandbar, shoot the sunset, sleep, shoot the sunrise, and hike out. Standard stuff. The hike in was grueling but breathtaking. The canyon walls started low, maybe 20 feet high, but as I followed the dry wash deeper, they rose up around me like cathedral walls, eventually towering 3, maybe 400 feet overhead. The sky became just a jagged ribbon of blue far above. By 4:00 p.m., I reached the spot I'd scouted on Google Earth. It was perfect. The canyon widened slightly into an amphitheater shape, with a massive, twisted cottonwood tree growing right in the center of the wash, its roots exposed like tangled snakes. I dropped my pack and drank some warm water. The silence was heavy. Usually in these canyons, you hear the wind funneled through the rock or the call of a raven, but here the air was dead still. I started setting up my tripod. I wanted to catch the golden hour, that brief window when the sun is low and makes the red rock look like it's on fire. I attached my 7200 telephoto lens, thinking I might catch some texture details on the canyon walls high above. I was scanning the rim of the canyon, looking for interesting erosion patterns. Through the viewfinder, the rock was magnified, every crack and fissure sharp and clear. I panned slowly from left to right, focusing on a ledge about 200 feet up. That's when I saw the anomaly. At first, my brain registered it as a trick of the light, a shadow that looked oddly organic. I adjusted the focus ring, sharpening the image. It wasn't a shadow. It was a man. He was crouching on a narrow ledge, utterly motionless. But the terrifying part was that he was painted. His entire body, skin, clothes, hair, was covered in a thick layer of red mud that matched the sandstone perfectly. If he hadn't been backlit by a sliver of sunlight, I never would have seen him. He was camouflaged into the cliff face. I lowered the camera, squinting with my naked eyes. I couldn't see him. He blended in too perfectly. I brought the camera back up. He was still there, and he was looking directly at me. I felt a cold prickle of sweat break out on my forehead. Okay, I thought. Ideally, this is just some hardcore survivalist or a weird art project. People do strange things in the desert. Maybe he was meditating. I decided to wave. A friendly, "I see you" gesture to break the tension. I stepped away from the camera and waved my arm over my head. Through the lens, I watched for a reaction. Nothing. He didn't flinch. He didn't blink. He just stared down into the canyon floor, his eyes dark holes in the red clay mask. Unsettled, I panned the camera to the right, checking the rest of the rim. My heart stopped. 50 yards away on another ledge was another one. Same red clay covering, same crouching posture. I panned left, another one. I spun the tripod head around. On the opposite canyon wall, 3 more. There were 6 of them, 6 figures caked in mud, perched on the high cliffs surrounding the amphitheater, forming a perfect circle around me. They weren't hiking, they weren't climbing, they were waiting. A primal alarm bell went off in my reptile brain. This is a hunting party. I didn't pack up my camp. I didn't take down the tent I had just pitched. I grabbed my camera bag, my water bladder, and my keys. I left the expensive tripod standing there. I left the sleeping bag. I started walking back the way I came. I tried to keep my pace casual, tried not to look like I was fleeing. Don't trigger the predator response, I told myself. Just walk. I walked for 10 minutes, my boots crunching loudly in the dry gravel. Every few seconds, I glanced up at the rim. The figures were moving. They weren't running. They were flowing over the rocks with a disturbing, fluid grace parallel to me. They were keeping pace, high up on the cliffs, tracking me from above. I picked up the pace to a jog. The canyon was narrow here, maybe 15 feet across. I felt like a rat in a maze. Then a rock clattered down the canyon wall and landed a few feet in front of me. I stopped. I looked up. One of them was directly above me, peering over the edge. He was close enough now that I could see the texture of the dried mud cracking on his shoulders. He held a large stone in his hand. He dropped it. I scrambled back as the rock smashed into the ground where I had been standing a second before. This wasn't observation anymore. This was aggression. I broke into a full sprint. The heavy sand made it a nightmare, sucking at my ankles, slowing me down. I could hear them now. Not footsteps, but the sound of sliding scree and displacing rocks as they traversed the high walls. They were flanking me. I needed to find a place where the canyon walls were unclimbable, or where the rim pushed back so they couldn't drop things on me. But the geography was against me. The walls were sheer and vertical here. I ran for a mile, my lungs burning, the dry air scorching my throat. I rounded a sharp bend in the canyon and skidded to a halt. Standing in the middle of the wash, blocking my path, were 3 of them. They had descended. They stood in a triangle formation. They were tall, lean, and completely naked under the layer of red mud. It was dried and caked, looking like a second skin. Their hair was matted with it. They didn't have weapons, no guns, no knives. They just had rocks, sharp, jagged pieces of river stone held in their hands. They didn't speak, they didn't scream. They just stood there, blocking the exit. I turned around. 2 more had dropped down behind me. I was boxed in. I was trapped in a section of the canyon about 50 yards long. The walls went up 300 feet on both sides. There was nowhere to go. Panic, pure and white-hot, took over. I backed up against the canyon wall, gripping my heavy camera by the strap. It was a solid block of magnesium alloy. It was the only weapon I had. "What do you want?" I screamed. My voice echoed weirdly off the stone. "I have money, take the gear." One of the men in front of me tilted his head. It was a bird-like movement, twitchy, curious. He took a step forward. I swung the camera like a flail, smashing it against the rock wall with a sickening crunch of glass. "I'm crazy," I yelled, trying to sound unhinged. "I'll kill you, back off." They stopped. They seemed confused by the noise. The destruction of the lens seemed to startle them more than my shouting. For a second, the standoff held. Then, from high up on the rim from where they had come, a sound echoed down. It was a low, resonant thrumming, like someone blowing across the top of a massive jug. Hoo-woom, hoo-woom. The men froze. They looked up. The sound came again, louder, vibrating in my chest. Without a word, without looking at me, the painted men turned and ran. They didn't run away from me. They ran toward the canyon walls. They scrambled up the sheer rock faces with impossible speed, finding handholds I couldn't even see. In seconds, they were 20 feet up. In a minute, they were gone, disappearing back into the cracks and shadows of the upper cliffs. I was alone again. I didn't question it. I didn't wait to see what had made the sound. I ran. I ran until my legs gave out, and then I walked, and then I crawled. I made it back to my truck just after dark. I locked the doors and drove 80 miles an hour down the washboard dirt road, destroying my suspension until I hit the pavement of Highway 12. I didn't stop driving until I reached a motel in Torrey. I sat in the shower for an hour, scrubbing the red dust off my skin, shaking uncontrollably. I developed the photos from the memory card a week later. I was hoping I had imagined it, hoping it was heat stroke or dehydration hallucination. Most of the photos were just landscapes, but the last few. I have a photo of the anomaly I saw through the telephoto lens. Even in the photo, he's hard to see. But if you zoom in, you can see the eyes. They aren't human eyes. The pupils are wrong. They're too large, blown wide open, swallowing the iris. But the worst photo isn't that one. It's one I didn't mean to take. It was a misfire, taken while the camera was swinging around my neck as I ran. It's blurry and tilted, showing the canyon wall behind me. In the corner of the frame, emerging from a fissure in the rock, is something else. It's not one of the painted men. It's the thing they were afraid of, the thing that made the thrumming sound. It's large, pale, and it has too many limbs. I don't go to the desert anymore. I stick to the coast now. I like the ocean. You can see what's coming at you in the ocean. In the canyons, the rock itself has eyes, and deeper down, there are things that even the monsters are afraid of. Winter hiking is a different beast entirely. In the summer, the mountains are alive. You have the crunch of pine needles, the buzz of flies, the distant roar of meltwater. But in the winter, specifically in the high Sierras, the silence is physical. It presses against your eardrums. The snow swallows sound waves, deadening the world. You can scream and the sound just drops. I was snowshoeing a route near the Mammoth Lakes area. I won't give the exact coordinates because I don't want anyone looking for this place. I was testing out some new cold weather gear for a sponsorship deal. I'm a semi-pro alpinist, so I know my way around an ice axe and a crampon. The forecast called for clear skies and a low of 20 degrees. Manageable, comfortable even if you keep moving. But mountains make their own weather. Around 2:00 p.m. the sky didn't just turn gray, it turned a flat, featureless white. The temperature plummeted 20 degrees in 20 minutes. The wind picked up, whipping ice crystals into a frenzy that scoured any exposed skin raw. I was in a whiteout. If you've never been in a true whiteout, you can't understand the disorientation. Up becomes down. The horizon vanishes. You are floating in a void of milk. I checked my GPS, but the cold had sapped the batteries faster than I expected. The screen flickered and died. I was blind, freezing, and walking by feel. I knew I had to descend to the tree line to find shelter from the wind. I stumbled downward, feeling gravity pull me, slipping and sliding on hidden ice patches beneath the powder. I walked for an hour, maybe two. My eyelashes were freezing together. Hypothermia makes you feel stupid. Your thoughts get syrupy and slow. I started thinking, maybe I'll just sit down for a minute. That's the thought that kills you. Just as I was about to give in to the urge to rest, I smelled smoke. Wood smoke, oak and pine. I forced my head up. Through the swirling white curtain of snow, I saw a geometric shape, a hard, straight line in a world of soft curves. It was a cabin. It wasn't a ruin. It was a sturdy, log-built structure with a steep A-frame roof to shed the snow. A chimney was puffing out gray smoke that was instantly torn away by the wind. A warm, orange glow pulsed from a single window. I almost cried. I stumbled toward it, my frozen fingers fumbling with the bindings of my snowshoes. I reached the heavy wooden door and didn't even knock. I just turned the iron handle and shoved it open. The heat hit me like a physical wall. It was glorious. I stumbled inside and slammed the door shut against the howling wind. The silence inside was instant. The cabin was small, maybe 20 by 20 feet. It was rustic but impeccably maintained. A cast-iron stove in the corner was roaring with a fresh fire. There was a thick rug on the floor, a rough-hewn table, and a single cot in the corner made up with heavy wool blankets. "Hello," I rasped. My voice was a croak. "I'm sorry to barge in, the storm." Silence. I looked around. No one was sitting in the single armchair by the fire. The cot was empty. I stepped further in, dripping melting snow onto the floorboards. "Is anyone here?" Nothing. I figured maybe the owner was in the outhouse or collecting wood, though going out in this storm seemed suicidal. I moved to the stove to warm my hands. That's when I noticed the pot. There was a Dutch oven sitting on top of the stove. I lifted the lid. Stew, beef and potato. It was bubbling gently. The smell was intoxicating. I looked at the table. There was a single place setting, a ceramic bowl, a spoon, and a glass of water. The water had no condensation on it. It had been poured recently. "Hello," I called again, louder this time. I checked the loft, just a ladder leading to a storage space with some ropes and dry wood. Empty. I was alone, but someone had been here minutes ago. The fire had fresh logs on it that hadn't even charred through yet. I sat down by the fire, shivering as the warmth began to return blood to my extremities. I told myself the owner probably saw me coming and went out to the woodshed or something. I'd wait. I'd apologize. I'd offer to pay for the soup. I waited for 20 minutes. The storm raged outside, rattling the window pane. To pass the time and to distract myself from the growing unease, I started looking at the decor. There were no trophy heads, no guns on the wall, just bookshelves. I walked over to the shelf. It wasn't books, it was photo albums. Dozens of them lined up perfectly by year. 1998, 1999, 2000, all the way to 2023. Curiosity got the better of me. I pulled out the one labeled 2023. I opened it expecting family photos, vacations, Christmas dinners. The first page was a photo of a tent, a bright orange North Face tent pitched in a clearing. I recognized the clearing. It was near Thousand Island Lake. I had camped there last July. I turned the page. A photo of a man sitting by a campfire, laughing. He was wearing a red down jacket. It was me. My stomach dropped so hard I felt nauseous. I flipped through the pages frantically. Me hiking the John Muir Trail, me sleeping in a hammock, me tying my boots at a trailhead. They were all telephoto shots, taken from a distance through trees from high vantage points. I grabbed the volume, labeled 2022. Me again, different gear, different haircut, but me climbing in Joshua Tree, me eating a sandwich at a rest stop in Bishop. I pulled 2015. Me a teenager, hiking with my dad. My breath was coming in short, shallow gasps. This wasn't a cabin. This was a shrine. Someone had been following me, not just for a day, for 10 years. Every time I went into the mountains, someone had been there, watching, documenting. I looked at the table again, the single-place setting. It wasn't for the owner, it was for me. They knew I was coming. How could they know? I didn't even know I was coming here. I was lost in a storm. Unless they herded me. I thought back to the descent, the subtle trail markers I had followed when the GPS died, the blazes cut into the trees that I assumed were official. They had led me here. The door handle clicked. I froze. It was a heavy iron latch. It lifted slowly, then dropped. Clack. Then again clack. It wasn't opening, it was locking. Someone was outside. They had been outside the whole time. They had watched me go in. They had watched me eat the warmth. They had watched me realize. I ran to the door and threw my shoulder against it. Locked. Solid oak barred from the outside. I ran to the window. Beyond the glass it was just swirling white darkness. But then a face pressed against the glass. It was covered in a ski mask, goggles reflecting the warm light of the room. But the hand resting on the glass was bare. It was old, weathered. The skin looked like leather. The figure didn't try to break in. It just tapped on the glass. Tap, tap, tap. Then the figure pointed, not at me, at the stove. I looked back at the stove, at the stovepipe going up through the ceiling. There was a lever on the pipe, a damper. The figure outside reached up. I couldn't see it, but I heard the metal screech on the roof and blocked the chimney. Smoke instantly began to billow back into the room. Thick, acrid wood smoke. They weren't trying to capture me. They were trying to smoke me out or suffocate me. I grabbed the heavy cast iron poker from the fireplace. I didn't hesitate. I swung it with everything I had at the window. Shatter. The glass exploded outward. The cold air rushed in, feeding the fire, swirling the smoke. I didn't wait to see if the figure was there. I vaulted through the broken window, shredding my jacket on the shards of glass, and landed in the snowbank outside. I scrambled up, swinging the poker blindly in the air. "Come on!" I screamed into the wind. "Where are you?" Nothing, just the wind howling like a banshee. I didn't see the figure. I didn't see footprints. The wind was erasing them as fast as they were made. I didn't stay to fight. I chose the storm. I ran into the whiteout. I ran until my lungs burned and my legs felt like lead. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I had to get away from that warm, glowing coffin. I lucked out. Pure blind luck. I stumbled onto a groomed snowmobile track about 3 miles down the mountain. A search and rescue team found me 2 hours later, huddled under a tree, half dead from hypothermia. I told them about the cabin. I drew them a map. I described the interior in perfect detail. They sent a team out when the storm cleared 2 days later. They found the clearing I described. They found the foundation. But there was no cabin, just charred, rotten logs, the ruins of a structure that had burned down decades ago. The rangers told me I was hallucinating. That hypothermia causes paradoxical stripping and vivid dreams. They said I probably huddled in the ruins and my dying brain invented the warmth and the stew to comfort me. But they couldn't explain the photo. When they found me, I was clutching something in my hand so tight my fingers were frozen around it. It was a photo I had ripped from the album before I jumped out the window. It's a photo of me, sleeping in my bed in my apartment in San Francisco, taken from inside my closet. The timestamp on the back is from 3 days before the hike. I moved, I changed my name. I don't hike anymore. But sometimes on cold nights I smell wood smoke in my apartment and I know he's still watching. I need to preface this by saying that geocaching saved my life once. It got me out of a depression, got me off the couch, and got me into nature. I loved the thrill of the hunt, following GPS coordinates to find hidden Tupperware containers in the woods, signing the logbook and trading trinkets. It felt like a secret global scavenger hunt. But geocaching is also what almost got me killed in the Ozarks last spring. I was chasing a 5-5 cache. In the geocaching world, ratings go from 1 to 5 for difficulty and terrain. A 5-5 means you need special equipment, like climbing gear or a boat, and it's mentally challenging to solve. This specific cache was legendary in the local forums. It was called the Widow's Peak. It hadn't been found in 3 years. The coordinates led to a remote section of the Mark Twain National Forest. It's rugged country, steep limestone bluffs, deep hollers choked with kudzu and poison ivy, and dense oak forests that block out the sky. I parked my Jeep at an unmarked trailhead at dawn. I had my GPS handheld, a backpack with repelling gear just in case, plenty of water and a first aid kit. I told my brother where I was going, sending him a pin of the parking spot. "If I'm not back by 8 p.m., I texted, "call the cavalry." He sent back a thumbs-up emoji. The hike in was brutal. There was no trail. I was bushwhacking through thorn bushes that tore at my pants. The humidity was suffocating, the air thick with the smell of wet decay and river mud. It took me 4 hours to cover 3 miles. When I finally reached ground zero, the point where the GPS says the cache is hiding, I was standing at the base of a sheer 40-foot limestone cliff. The signal was bouncing off the rock walls, giving me a wide search radius. I spent an hour turning over rocks, checking hollow logs and poking into crevices. Nothing. Then I saw it. About 20 feet up the cliff face, there was a small, unnatural fissure. It looked too dark, too regular. I scrambled up the scree slope and free-climbed the first 10 feet. It was easy scrambling, plenty of handholds. I reached the fissure and peered inside. There sat an old, rusted military ammo can, the classic geocache container. I felt that rush of dopamine. I pulled it out. It was heavy, heavier than usual. I balanced myself on a ledge, sitting with my legs dangling, and popped the latch. Clunk. The lid creaked open. Usually a cache is filled with swag, plastic army men, stickers, foreign coins. This one was empty. Well, not empty. There was a single object in the center of the metal box. A walkie-talkie, a cheap yellow Motorola two-way radio. I frowned. This was weird. Was this part of the puzzle? A multicache where you have to get instructions for the next stage. I picked it up. It was on. The battery light was blinking green. I pressed the talk button. "Hello, is this part of the cache?" Static. I waited. I was about to put it back, thinking the batteries were dead, when the speaker crackled. "You found it." The voice was crystal clear. Male, deep. No southern accent. It sounded flat, almost synthesized, but definitely human. I nearly dropped the radio. "Who is this?" "I've been watching you for a while, David," the voice said. My blood ran cold. He used my name. My geocaching username is TrailFinder88. I don't use my real name online. Nowhere on my profile does it say David. "Who is this?" I repeated, my voice tighter this time. I scanned the woods below. It was just a sea of green leaves. "Where are you?" "I'm close. You looked like you were struggling with those thorns earlier." Mile 2 looked rough. He had been watching me for miles. "Is this a joke?" I yelled at the radio, looking around wildly. Did my brother put you up to this? Look in the box again, David. Lift the false bottom. I looked down at the ammo can on my lap. I tapped the bottom. It sounded hollow. I pried at the metal edge with my fingernail. A thin plate of metal popped up. Underneath were photos. Polaroids. I picked up the stack, my hands trembling so bad I almost dropped them off the cliff. The first photo was of my Jeep, parked this morning. The second photo was of me, walking away from the Jeep. The third photo was taken from behind me, showing the back of my backpack as I pushed through some ferns. The fourth photo was taken from above. It showed me, right now, sitting on this ledge holding the ammo can. I looked up. Directly above me, hanging over the lip of the cliff, was a small black dome, a camera lens. Smile, the voice on the radio whispered. I didn't think, I reacted. I shoved the ammo can away from me. It clattered down the cliff face, spilling the photos into the brush. I scrambled backward, trying to down climb, but my panic made me clumsy. I slipped, scraping my forearms raw on the limestone, and slid the last 10 feet, landing hard in the dirt. Don't run, David. The game isn't over. The voice wasn't coming from the radio anymore. The radio was still in the box on the ground. The voice was coming from the trees. He had a speaker system, or he was shouting. It was hard to tell with the echoes off the bluff. I left everything. I left the ammo can. I left the radio. I turned and sprinted back into the dense undergrowth. North, the voice boomed, echoing through the hollow. Go north, David. That's where the bonus cache is. I ran south. I ran back toward the way I came. But the woods didn't look the same. In my panic, I lost the faint game trail I had followed in. I was just crashing through briars, tearing my clothes, bleeding. Crack! A gunshot? No, it was a tree branch snapping, but it was loud and close. I stopped, crouching behind a fallen oak, trying to silence my breathing. I was gasping like a drowning man. Silent, just the buzzing of gnats. Then the radio crackle sound again, but it was coming from my backpack. I froze. I slowly took off my pack. I unzipped the side pocket. There was another walkie-talkie, identical to the first one. He had put it there when I realized with a sick sinking feeling when I stopped to pee at the halfway point. I had left my pack on the ground and walked 20 feet away for privacy. He must have been right there, in the brush, inches away from my bag. I grabbed the radio to throw it, to smash it against a tree. I wouldn't do that, the voice said from the device in my hand. I have your car keys. I patted my pocket, empty. I took them when you put your jacket down at the creek crossing. You're very unobservant, David. I sank to my knees. What do you want? I whispered into the radio. I want you to finish the course. Go north. I'm not going north. Then you're going to die here. It's a long walk back to town, and night is coming. He was right. The shadows were already lengthening in the deep valley. I made a choice. I wasn't going to play his game, and I wasn't going back to the car where he expected me. I stood up and started climbing, not the cliff but the steep, wooded ridge to the east. It was grueling. The slope was 45 degrees. I was clawing at roots, dragging myself up. I knew if I could get to the high ground, I might get cell service. Wrong way, David, the radio taunted. I turned it off. I took the batteries out and buried them in the mud. Then I kept climbing. It took me an hour to crest the ridge. The sun was setting, painting the sky a bruised purple. I pulled out my phone. 1 bar. I dialed 911. 911, what is your emergency? I'm being hunted, I gasped. Mark Twain National Forest, near the Sugar Creek drainage. He has my keys. He's watching me. Sir, stay on the line. We're pinging your location. I stayed on that ridge all night. I didn't make a fire. I didn't use a flashlight. I wedged myself into a crevice between 2 boulders and held my pocket knife. I heard him. Sometime around 3:00 a.m. I heard walking. Not careful walking. Loud, angry walking. He was thrashing through the brush below me, sweeping a powerful flashlight beam back and forth. Come out, David, he screamed. It wasn't the calm, synthesized voice anymore. It was raw and furious. "You're ruining the game, it's not fair." He sounded like a child throwing a tantrum, a child in a grown man's body. The beam swept over my hiding spot once, twice. I squeezed my eyes shut. He eventually moved on, his screaming fading into the distance. At dawn, a sheriff's helicopter spotted me. They guided a ground team to my location. When we got back to the trailhead, my Jeep was there. It was untouched. My keys were sitting on the driver's seat. The police investigated the coordinates of the cache. They found the ammo can. Inside, they found the Polaroids of me, but they found more. They found a USB drive. It contained videos, dozens of them, videos of other hikers, other geocachers. In the videos, they followed his instructions. They went north. I won't describe what was in those videos. The police wouldn't let me watch them, and the officer who did threw up. They said it was a series of traps, pits, snares, psychological torture chambers built into hidden caves. They never caught him. The Widow's Peak cache was wiped for fingerprints. The radios were untraceable cheap electronics bought with cash. But sometimes, I get notifications on my geocaching app. Someone logs a "found it" on my old hides. The user has no name, just a blank profile. And the comment is always the same. "TFTC, thanks for the cache, missed you at the finish line." I've hiked with Elias since we were freshmen in college. We're both 30 now. We know each other's paces, we know each other's grunts and groans, and we know exactly how much water the other guy has left just by looking at how he's walking. When you spend that much time on the trail with someone, you develop a sort of telepathy. You don't need to talk, you just exist in rhythm. Last August, we flew up to Alberta to tackle a remote section of the Jasper National Park backcountry. It was a bucket list trip. We wanted to get away from the tourist crowds at Banff and find some real, untouched wilderness. We mapped out a 3-day loop that took us over a high-altitude pass, through a glacial valley, and back down to the logging roads. The first day was brutal but rewarding. We climbed 4,000 feet, camping near a small, nameless alpine lake that looked like a pool of spilled ink. The stars were so bright they actually cast shadows. The trouble started on day 2, around noon. We were crossing a massive scree field, a slope of loose, jagged rock debris left behind by retreating glaciers. It's miserable terrain. Every step is a slide. For every 2 feet you go up, you slide back 1. It sounds like walking on broken dinner plates. Clack shh, clack shh. We reached a point where the trail markers, little piles of stones called cairns, disappeared. The map said we needed to cross a saddle between 2 peaks, but the route wasn't obvious. There were 2 possible notches in the ridge line. "I'll scout the left one," Elias said, dropping his heavy pack. He was sweating, his face flushed red from the exertion. "You rest here. If it's clear, I'll wave. If it's a dead end, I'll come back." "Take the radio," I said, tossing him one of our walkie-talkies. Yeah, save your water." He caught it, clipped it to his strap, and started scrambling up the loose rock toward the left notch. I sat on my pack, drinking warm water and watching him. He was a blue dot against a wall of gray stone. I watched him crest the ridge, stand silhouetted against the sky for a moment, and then drop down out of sight to check the other side. I waited. 10 minutes passed. The wind whistled through the rocks. A marmot chirped somewhere. 20 minutes. I clicked the radio. "Elias, how's it looking?" "Static, just the white noise of the frequency." I wasn't worried yet. Rock walls block radio signals easily. He was probably just below the line of sight. 30 minutes. Now I was annoyed. We had miles to cover. I stood up, cupping my hands around my mouth. "Elias, let's go." My voice echoed back at me. Go, go, go. 45 minutes. Panic started to itch at the back of my throat. I put my pack back on. I decided to go up after him. Maybe he twisted an ankle. Maybe he slid. I started the climb. It was grueling. My boots slipped on the shale. I kept looking up at the notch, waiting for his head to pop up. Just as I reached the crest of the ridge, about 10 feet from the top, I heard footsteps crunching above me. Elias walked over the edge. He looked fine. He wasn't limping. He wasn't bleeding. He was standing tall, looking down at me with a blank expression. "Hey," I yelled, breathless. "Where the hell have you been? I radioed you." He stared at me for a second, then blinked. "Battery died," he said. His voice was flat, no inflection. Elias usually has a booming, expressive voice. "Is the route good?" I asked, pulling myself up the last few feet to stand beside him. "It's good," he said. "Let's go." He turned and started walking back down toward where we had left his pack. I frowned. Something felt off. Maybe he was just tired. Altitude sickness can make people weird, lethargic, confused. I watched him descend. He was moving incredibly smoothly. Usually on scree, Elias is like a baby giraffe. He stumbles, he curses, he kicks rocks. But now he was gliding. His boots found purchase on the shifting rocks instantly. He didn't slide. He didn't use his hands for balance. I followed him down. "You okay, man? You look a little spaced out." He didn't answer. He just reached his pack, swung the 60-pound weight onto his shoulders like it was a bag of feathers, and started walking. We hiked for 3 hours. The vibe was excruciating. Usually we talk. We talk about work, about girls, about sports. But Elias didn't say a word. He walked about 10 paces ahead of me, setting a blistering pace. I was practically jogging to keep up. "Slow down," I wheezed. He slowed down, but he didn't turn around. By late afternoon, we reached the tree line. We were in a dense pine forest now. The sun was setting, casting long, creepy shadows through the trees. "Let's camp here," I said, spotting a flat clearing near a stream. Elias stopped instantly. He dropped his pack and stood there, staring into the woods. I set up the tent. Usually this is a 2-man job. I pitch the body, he does the fly, but he just stood there. "Are you going to help?" I snapped. I was exhausted and angry. He turned slowly. "I'm not tired." "Well, I am. Sit down, eat something." I tossed him a protein bar. It hit his chest and fell to the ground. He didn't try to catch it. He stared at it in the dirt, then slowly bent down, keeping his back perfectly straight, bending only at the knees, and picked it up. He didn't open it. He just put it in his pocket. That night inside the tent, the terror really set in. We were lying in our sleeping bags, shoulder to shoulder. It was pitch black. "Elias," I whispered, "seriously, what happened up there? Did you hit your head?" Silence. Then he spoke. The view was beautiful. "Okay, but why didn't you answer the radio?" I was listening. Listening to what? "The rocks." I turned on my headlamp. The beam hit his face. He was wide open. His eyes were unblinking, staring straight up at the nylon roof of the tent. His pupils were huge. But it was his skin that made me recoil. Elias is a hairy guy. He has a 5 o'clock shadow by noon. He hadn't shaved in 2 days, but his face was smooth. Not shaven smooth, like the hair follicles weren't there anymore, like the skin was just wax poured over a skull. "Turn off the light," he said. His lips didn't move enough. It was like a ventriloquist act. I turned off the light. My heart was hammering so hard I thought he could feel the vibration through the ground mat. I lay there for hours, clutching my bear spray canister. I didn't sleep. I listened to his breathing. It was too rhythmic, in, out, perfectly timed, no variation, no snoring, no shifting in his sleep. Around 3:00 a.m., I heard a noise from outside. It was faint, coming from far away, back up the trail we had come down. Static. Then a voice. "Copy, hear me, Svel." It was a radio transmission. I froze. The radio was in Elias' pack, in the vestibule of the tent. I sat up slowly. The voice came again, drifting on the wind, but clearer this time. "Leg is broken. James, please. I can see the ridge, but I can't climb." It was Elias. The real Elias. My blood turned to ice. If Elias was calling me on the radio from the scree field, then who was lying next to me? I slowly turned my head. The thing next to me was sitting up. It was sitting perfectly upright in the dark. "He's very loud," the thing whispered. It wasn't Elias' voice anymore. It was a mimicry. It sounded like gravel grinding together. I didn't think. I didn't grab my boots. I didn't unzip the door. I grabbed the knife I kept in my boot, slashed the back wall of the tent, and threw myself out into the night. I ran barefoot through the pine forest. I didn't feel the needles tearing my feet. I didn't feel the cold. I heard the tent zipper open behind me. "James," the thing called out, "you forgot your water." I ran until I hit the logging road. I ran until I saw headlights, a logging truck coming down the mountain for an early shift. I stood in the middle of the road, waving my arms like a maniac. The driver slammed on his brakes, inches from me. He took me to the ranger station. I was incoherent, rambling about duplicates and radios. They launched a search and rescue operation immediately. They found Elias 2 days later. He was at the bottom of the other side of the ridge, the side he had gone to scout. He had fallen 50 feet and shattered his femur. He was dehydrated, hypothermic, and near death, but he was alive. He told them he had been radioing me for hours, but I never answered. He said he saw me come to the top of the ridge, look down at him, and then just turn around and walk away. I tried to explain. I tried to tell them that I didn't walk away. I tried to tell them that something else came down that mountain with me. They found my tent. It was slashed open just like I said. But inside they found Elias' sleeping bag. It was filled with stones. Hundreds of smooth, gray river stones packed into the shape of a human body. And lying on top of the stones was the protein bar I had given him. The wrapper was still sealed, but the bar inside was gone. It hadn't been eaten. It had been absorbed. The wrapper was flat, pristine, and completely empty. I haven't seen Elias since. I can't look at him. Every time I look at his face, I expect to see that smooth, waxy skin. I expect to hear the gravel in his voice. And sometimes when I'm alone in a quiet room, I can still hear the rhythmic breathing. In, out, waiting for the lights to go out. I've always been the type of hiker who hates marked trails. The pavement, the signage, the families with Bluetooth speakers. It ruins the point for me. I go to the woods to disappear. I want the silence that rings in your ears. I want the feeling that I am the first person to step on a patch of moss in 100 years. That arrogance is what led me to the Hoh rainforest in Washington state last November. If you know the Hoh, you know it's prehistoric. It's a temperate rainforest, draped in hanging moss that looks like old rags, with ferns the size of cars. It is wet, green, and incredibly dense. I was 3 days into a bushwhacking trip, navigating by compass and topo map, miles away from the nearest maintained trail. It was raining, a constant cold drizzle that seeps into your bones. I was traversing a steep ridge line, looking for a place to pitch my hammock for the night. The ground was unstable, a mix of rotting cedar logs and slick mud. 1 minute I was walking, the next the world tilted. The ground beneath my right boot just dissolved. It wasn't a slide, it was a collapse. I fell backward, tumbling through a screen of ferns bouncing off tree roots. I remember the sound of snapping branches, the blur of green and gray, and then a sickening crunch as my leg hit a granite outcrop. I blacked out. When I woke up, the light was failing. I was lying in a ravine, a narrow slot canyon cut by centuries of runoff. The walls were vertical, slick with slime and moss, rising about 30 feet above me. I tried to sit up and screamed. The pain was blinding. My right leg was twisted at an angle that legs shouldn't go. The tibia had punched through the skin. It was a compound fracture. I lay there for an hour, hyperventilating, trying to get my brain to work through the shock. I checked my pockets. My GPS was smashed. My phone was gone, likely flung out during the fall. My pack was still strapped to me, which probably saved my spine, but I was trapped. I screamed for help until my voice gave out. The moss swallowed the sound. It was like shouting into a pillow. I spent the first night shivering in the mud, drifting in and out of consciousness. I knew the protocol: stay put, keep warm, wait for rescue. But I also knew I hadn't told anyone exactly where I was going. Just the Hoh. That's 1,000,000 acres of haystack for them to find a needle in. Morning came with a gray, watery light. I dragged myself to a slightly drier patch of gravel. I was assessing my water supply, half a Nalgene, when I saw him. A face appeared over the rim of the ravine. He was looking down at me. He was wearing a bright yellow rain slicker, the hood pulled up. He looked like a lighthouse keeper or a fisherman. An older guy, maybe 60, with a gray beard. I have never felt such a rush of relief in my life. I started crying. "Hey," I croaked, waving my arms. "Help down here, my leg is broken." The man didn't say anything. He just stared. He rested his elbows on the edge of the ravine, chin in his hands, watching me like I was a TV show. "Please," I yelled. "I need a rope. Can you get reception? Call 911. He stayed there for a full minute, just watching. Then, slowly, he stood up and walked away. "Wait," I screamed. "Where are you going? Don't leave me." I thought maybe he was going to get gear. Maybe he was going to hike out to the ranger station. I told myself that's what he was doing. He came back 20 minutes later. He didn't have a rope. He had a bucket. A white 5-gallon plastic bucket attached to a length of paracord. He lowered it down slowly. It bumped against the mossy walls. Thump, thump. It reached the bottom, landing in the mud a few feet from me. I dragged myself toward it, wincing with every movement. I looked inside. There was a bottle of water, a generic brand unopened, and a sandwich wrapped in wax paper. I looked up at him. "Thank you," I gasped. "But I need to get out. Can you pull me up?" He shook his head slowly. "No." The word drifted down, soft and calm. "Why not?" I pleaded. "I'll die down here." "You're broken," he said. "It wasn't malicious. It was matter of fact. You stay." Then he pulled the rope up, leaving the bucket. He turned and walked away again. I drank the water in one go. I ate the sandwich, ham and cheese, dry, no mayo. I was confused, terrifyingly confused. Who brings a sandwich to a rescue but refuses to rescue? He came back that evening. He brought a folding camp chair. He set it up on the edge of the ravine, sat down, and just watched. He watched me try to splint my leg with branches. He watched me struggle to set up my tarp to keep the rain off. He didn't speak. He just observed, occasionally taking a sip from a thermos. This went on for 4 days. I became the thing in the pit. Every morning the bucket came down. Sometimes it was water and a granola bar. Once it was a half-eaten apple. Once it was a handful of raw ground beef wrapped in plastic. I ate it all. I was starving. I tried to engage him. I asked him his name. I told him about my family. I threatened him. I begged him. "My name is Sarah," I yelled up at him on the 3rd day. "I have a sister in Seattle. She's looking for me." He just looked at me, impassive. "You're holding up well," he commented, like he was judging a prize pig. "Better than the last one." My blood ran cold. "The last one?" He didn't answer. He just folded his chair and left. That night the fever set in. My leg was infected. I could smell it, a sweet, rotting smell rising from the wound. I was hallucinating. Shadows in the ravine started to move. I started digging. I don't know why. Maybe I was trying to dig a latrine, or maybe I was just delirious and trying to dig a tunnel. I clawed at the mud near the back wall of the ravine, under an overhang. My fingers brushed something hard. I pulled it out. It was a boot. A hiking boot, leather rotted through. I kept digging. Inside the boot was a foot. Just bones, held together by tough, connective tissue and a wool sock. I scrabbled frantically at the mud. I found a backpack frame, a rusted belt buckle, and then a skull, crushed on one side. I wasn't the first rescue. I was just the latest pet. The realization broke something in me. I wasn't waiting for rescue anymore. I was waiting to die, to become part of the mud for the next hiker to find. The rage that followed was clearer than the fever. On the 5th day, the storm of the century hit. The rain didn't just fall, it hammered. The ravine started to fill. The trickle of water at the bottom turned into a knee-deep torrent within hours. The man appeared at the rim. He looked concerned, not for me but for his entertainment. He was wearing his yellow slicker, struggling to stand against the wind. He lowered the bucket. "Eat," he shouted over the wind. "Keep your strength up." I dragged myself to the bucket. I looked inside. It was empty. I looked up. "It's empty," I screamed. He leaned over, squinting. "What?" He leaned further. He was holding the rope with both hands, trying to stabilize the bucket so he could see inside. I didn't take the food, I took the rope. I wrapped the paracord around my wrist, gritted my teeth, and yanked with every ounce of hysterical strength I had left. It wasn't enough to pull me up, but the ground up there was wet, the mud was slick, and he was leaning too far over. His eyes went wide, his feet slipped. He didn't scream, he just gasped as he tipped forward. He fell. He hit the ravine floor with a wet thud 10 feet away from me. He landed on his neck. I heard the snap. It was louder than the storm. He lay there, face down in the rising water, his yellow slicker billowing out like a weird, plastic flower. I crawled over to him, I checked for a pulse. Nothing. I didn't feel guilty, I felt practical. I searched his pockets, keys, a pocket knife, a radio. I grabbed the radio. It was a high-end Garmin with an SOS beacon. I pressed the button. The floodwaters were rising fast. They were lifting his body, swirling it around the narrow space. I dragged myself up onto the highest rock I could find, clutching the radio, watching his dead body bump against the walls. Thump, thump, just like the bucket. The helicopter came 6 hours later. The winch operator said it was the hardest extraction he'd ever done. They found the bones in the mud. They identified 3 different people, missing hikers from over a span of 10 years. The man in the yellow slicker was a local, a retired biology teacher. Everyone thought he was a nice, quiet guy who liked to birdwatch. They found his journal in his house. He kept detailed notes. He wasn't killing us. He was studying survival instincts in isolated environments. He wanted to see how long we would last, how long we would keep hope. I'm physically healed now. I have a limp and a lot of metal in my leg, but I don't hike anymore. I can't stand being looked at. Even now, sitting in a coffee shop or on the bus, if I feel someone's eyes on me, I panic. I feel like I'm back in the mud. I feel like I'm something in a jar. And sometimes when it rains, I get hungry. Not for food, but for the specific taste of a cheap ham sandwich wrapped in wax paper dropped from the sky.